Welcome to episode 7, season 1, episode 7 of the Unveiling the Civil War podcast. I'm Ben Flowerday. I'm joined by Ben Quina, as well as Dylan Obney. We've been kind of picking up steam here on this podcast, still going strong, talking some new topics. So today we're going to be talking about a lesser known campaign and battle that took place in the fall of 1863. Actually, we just passed the anniversary of the battle a couple days ago. But the Bristoe campaign and the Battle of Bristoe Station specifically. So we'll get into that in just a little bit, but we'll go ahead and reintroduce everyone here. Again, my name's Ben Flowerday. I've been involved in Civil War living history for almost 10 years now, and a little bit more on the scholarly type research for about 2 years. I've known Ben Quina since I was a wee lad in high school, and Dylan, we met a couple years ago in an event. So Ben, you want to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about why you're here?
Thanks, Ben. Ben Quine. I've been a longtime Civil War reenactor. Very interested in all things Army of Northern Virginia, specifically the Third Corps, AP Hill. Getting more into the Western stuff now, Stones River, and reading Ed Bears's Vicksburg trilogy. But just have been fascinated with this stuff my entire life and love sharing it. I really enjoy talking to you guys who take it seriously, and I hope that we're providing some sort of a educational outlet for people that are our friends and colleagues, and maybe people that we don't even know, just to talk about this and get it out there. So I really enjoy the opportunity to do that. So I'm looking forward to today's presentation. Why don't you go ahead, Dylan?
Yeah, today's going to be exciting. I think it's cool to talk about the lesser known stuff. I know like we were just saying, everyone loves the red meat stuff, Gettysburg and reenacting topics, but today's going to be something cool, a little bit outside the box, a little more unheard of. But then, like you were saying, Hill's Corps. So this is going to be
interesting. Yeah, this is a big one for that. It'll be interesting to see. I think Ben has a presentation, like a slideshow presentation, which would be cool. But both Dylan and I and Ben reenact primarily units that were in Hill's Third Corps, the Florida Brigade and the South Carolina Brigade. And what unit do you portrayed in the past, Dylan? Like the actual regiment?
Yeah, 2nd Florida is our main one from Perry's Brigade.
Right.
But we've also done 8th Florida along with some of the Western stuff, 4th Florida. So
you have a preference?
2nd Florida. Florida was where we started out, and that's where all the Florida history research for me began. And it's just such an incredible unit. If you look back at their battle record and some of the stuff that these guys went through, I'm more into the unheard of stuff, the lesser represented stuff, and Florida's troops of Hill's Corps is definitely in that category. And just reading stuff like Small but Spartan Band and Seton Fleming's memoirs are really, really nitty gritty stuff about. Yeah, love it. I'm so glad you got that. What do you think so far?
I got it. I'm reading it.
What do you think
That's
so
right.
far?
You said you were going to get some sort of brigade history for every brigade in Hill's Corps, correct?
I'm trying. Although, like Dylan was saying, it's an underrepresented unit in the Confederate Army, and so I'm slowly working towards that. I just got a really cool regimental on the 14th Georgia, which was in Thomas's brigade. Thomas is like one of those really unknown generals and his brigade. So there's not much stuff out there for Thomas. But what I'm learning about this Florida guys, with my research with the 12th South Carolina is like, I'm reading a lot of these same battles that they were in. I'm like, oh yeah, it's kind of the same stuff that I wrote in my book because they were involved in some of the same stuff. So it's just interesting. But no, this is a good book. Anybody that is interested in Florida troops in the Army of Northern Virginia, it's not a very big brigade. It was one of the smallest brigades, actually, but small but Spartan Band. I'm enjoying it, and it really fills a void in the historiography about the Army of Northern Virginia. But anyway,
Cheers. I'm glad you got into it.
Yeah.
Williamsburg, you just probably got past that a little bit ago, it looks like.
Yep.
But that's where obviously they lost their first regimental commander, George T. Ward. And he the whole story of them going out onto the battlefield and getting his body afterwards is just so intense. And then a couple of us have actually seen where he's buried at the church there in Williamsburg, and we actually had to hop the fence to get into the graveyard, but
Really?
yeah, but it's worth it. And yeah, it's crazy to see. You can go see his grave there. Forget exactly what church it is in Williamsburg, but yeah, you can still go see the grave of Colonel Ward.
All right. So, what, if anything, are you wearing, and what are you guys drinking?
Well, I think I'm the only one that's rocking anything reenacting wise here, but this is my
Wearing a hat, Dylan.
Oh yeah, there you go. I got my God, I'm totally blanking right now. It's a captain's shell jacket with the captain's bars. It's got the ever elusive Florida star on there with Florida buttons. It's commutation shell. It's got the two front pockets that we've seen in that are similar to commutation style jackets that came out of Florida that we discussed before. But this is actually a Tart's royal blue on brown jean wool. So I don't know if it's coming through, but you got like the little, like the threads of royal blue on the brown jean wool fabric. I don't know, but this is one of my favorite jackets that I still rock. And then this is a Dirty Billy made kepi with royal blue jean wool. But yeah. Oh, and then luckily I'm bringing back, got some Yinglings that I snuck back on the plane with me from Oklahoma, where I was just at recently, helping my girlfriend's mother move. But brought one thing back from the middle of nowhere.
Still haven't had any fan sponsored Yingling packages show up at the house. Have you guys?
Oh,
I am.
Not yet. I'm still waiting.
I've got a groupie fan. Yeah, they're sending.
Really?
I'm kidding.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say.
I'm wearing a federal issue cardigan, a federal blue, and drinking some scotch.
Is that Schuylkill Arsenal?
No.
No.
John T. Martin contract.
J.C. Penney.
Then I'm wearing my 1950s stuck in Hawaii shirt and black British slouch hat that I have come to like quite a bit.
By the way, I need to ask you a question, Mr. Flowerday.
Yes. Yeah.
Why on earth are you selling that beautiful the beautiful tan slouch hat that we all love?
I don't love it. It hasn't grown on me the way. So I've taken polls from multiple people. You love it. Dylan's so on it.
I'm a fan. I'm not. I enjoy that hat. I just think it's a little big.
I'm telling everybody right now, if you were on the Civil War trade blankets, do not buy that brown hat. Do not buy it. I want that hat remaining in the family. It is a nice hat, and it goes very well with your impression.
What if I had Avery make me one that actually fits instead?
I think it does fit.
It does not.
I got a question for Pointa here.
Hang on 1 second. I need to defend myself here. I wore that hat to Gettysburg, the 3-day Gettysburg, and it irritated the crap out of me every single day. Every day I woke up, I wished I had my other hat, but I didn't because I wanted to give it a full event. It did not stay on my head. It didn't stay on my head. I had to roll up the sweatband. It wasn't because it's a bad hat. It's just too big. I cannot understate how small my head is. For those of you listening, I am 6'1", 200 pounds, and I wear a child's size medium hat. So anything that's sold to me that is too big, it just would not stay on my head.
Well, I'm asking the reenactors out there not to purchase this hat. Don't do it. Go ahead, Mr. Obney. You had a comment.
Well, that brings me to my question for Master Quina over here. I think it was last week. It may have been before that, but you expressed your disgust at the crushables that you see in the
Yes.
hobby. would you rather someone out there that has a crushable to buy that hat and take one crushable out of the hobby, or leave Bren's hat in the family?
I would rather have someone buy it and get one crushable out of the hobby. That would be good.
Hobby, sir. That's why you're a good leader.
No, no, I would agree with that. I just love that hat.
It's a good hat.
I love the idea of that hat, but the execution in terms of it not fitting my head makes me sad.
You already have a hat. Don't buy Ben's hat. But if you have a terrible Barbie crushable hat,
fair enough.
Call him and ask for a deal from Mr.
And if you have a crushable, Ben's going to give you a 15% discount if you get one crushable out of the hobby in favor of a nice tan brown Avery Miller slouch hat.
Use code Quina hates crushables.
Mention the podcast in a similar vein, if you are an authentic Civil War vendor and would like to sponsor this podcast, we've done too much free advertising for a few people. So if you want to, say hi, we can 100% accommodate that. Again, just send us a message on Facebook or send one of us a message via Facebook Messenger.
That works too.
And by the way, I'm wearing this hat. I didn't get it around to it because I was interrupted by Quina's disdain for my hat decisions. I'm getting over something. I'm still a little sick, so I'm just drinking coffee with Bailey's because I think that's solid medicine. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but the weather turned last week here in Michigan, and every day is a struggle.
What is that? What is this weather you speak of?
Yeah,
so you would know what that's all.
So Dylan, in the Midwest, we have these things called seasons. Yeah, so in about
73 right now.
Early to mid-October, it goes from being like 75 degrees every day to like being 50 and raining during the day, and then like cold at night. And then once in a while we'll get it to go back up to like 85, and everyone just gets sick, and it's fun. Yeah.
Only the strong survive out there, huh?
Oh yeah. Come to a Civil War encampment in April and you'll see. All right.
Come to my winter quarters event. We'll talk.
winter in California. Or you guys have mountains. It gets cold in the mountains in the north, doesn't it?
That's the thing, is we don't have seasons like you think, but we have seasons and places. Just every place is that season all year round.
All right. Well, so I've prepared a pretty brief presentation on Bristoe. It's going to be an overview, but it's definitely meant more towards encouraging discussion versus just a narrative of me droning on for an hour. So feel free to chime in. We're going to go over some stuff.
That's
Ben,
hilarious.
That's a movie reference from Dr. Strangelove.
Iverson Part 2.
Iverson Part 2. Parental warning. If you like North Carolina, you may want to cover your ears at times. There is going to be North Carolina slander throughout this presentation. There's also going to be some potentially AP Hill slander, Ben. I don't know. I mean, yeah.
There's no Dick Anderson slander.
There's
We'll see.
not as much Dick Anderson slander, but again, what did Anderson do? Really?
He led the way.
Background, obviously, this so the Bristoe campaign takes place in October of 1863. So obviously the year leading up was a pretty taxing one for both armies. You have heavy fighting in the spring and summer. You've got Chancellorsville and Gettysburg in the east are the two major battles. In the west, you have the Vicksburg campaign, and then the campaign on the return from Gettysburg even cost a couple generals. So when both armies got back to Central Virginia, one of the things that they really were interested in doing was just rest and recuperation. They wrote about how this was a time of just getting the army back up into good shape. Most units got new uniforms issued. There were inspections being held almost every week. up to the division and corps level. Ben, you talked about the inspection. Was it of what was now Wilcox's division and Hill's entire corps was it September of 1863 that they did that?
Yeah, the first late August, they did a full. I don't have the dates in front of me. Late August, they did a divisional review with Wilcox's division, and then on September 11th, 1863, there was this huge review in Orange Courthouse of Hill's entire Third Corps, about some 18 to 20,000 men. And there's a great description of this in the wartime letters of Robert E. Lee. His son wrote a description of this event, and a bunch of people came up from Richmond, and the generals' wives were there, and it was quite a gala day, and it was really kind of a refreshing of the Army. Kind of, we're back after this terrible campaign to the north. But it took Lee rode a circle around each division, and it took about 9 miles to do. They estimated, and he rode with each division commander and AP Hill. And there was an account that he actually, Lee was such a superb horseman, he had outridden some of the commanders and was still in tip-top shape when he got to the end. But it was a pretty cool review. And so this is right before Longstreet gets sent out to the west. But Lee is definitely making good on his losses from Gettysburg.
Yeah, look out for future episode on the passing review of the Third Corps.
So yeah, by the end of July, Lee returned to Central Virginia. In a short period of time, Longstreet is going to be sent west with Hood's and McLaws division to help reinforce the Army of Tennessee. Also of note, one thing, Gettysburg and Chancellorsville, they not only took away a lot of men, but the command structures for a lot of the divisions and a lot of the brigades were pretty weakened as well. I mean, you lost generals, you lost a lot of brigadier generals, you lost division commanders like Dorsey Pender, Johnston Pettigrew were killed. The list goes on. So one of the biggest struggles that's going to be happening that you're going to see from here really until the end of the war is people not quite able to step into the shoes that they're meant to fill, being kind of promoted beyond their capabilities. That's not always going to be the case, but it's definitely going to be a theme. But anyway, Longstreet is sent west with Hood and McLaws, and as soon as this happened, Meade has a flash of uncanny aggressiveness and sees an opportunity to strike a weakened Army of Northern Virginia. So he moves into Culpeper and actually occupies the town of Culpeper. But before he could continue to strike any blows against Lee, he has to send the 11th and 12th Corps over to Chattanooga to help the federal effort in Tennessee, along the Tennessee-Georgia border. So he's kind of makes this move, and then immediately what he thought was his major numerical advantage is going to be depleted. Lee, now under what he considers even fighting terms, he decides that he is going to try to flank Meade's now weakened army. And so on October 9th, he moves towards the northwest around Cedar Mountain in an attempt to turn Meade's flank. Meade realizes exactly what's happening, and he begins a retreat northeasterly along the Orange and Alexandria Railroad. And this railroad obviously connects Orange County with Alexandria, Virginia, runs basically northeast between the two, and it's going to be a primary objective. It's a key part of this campaign. It kind of shapes the campaign. So leading up to the battles at Bristoe Station, you have the Federal Army retreating, Confederates pursuing, and Stuart not surprisingly does this thing. You're not going to believe this. He rides too far and gets cut off from the main line of the Confederate Army.
Heard that story.
I'm sorry?
You've heard that story before.
Yeah, no, it's just this uncanny ability. He wanted to he saw some opportunity to take over the supply wagons of the Army of the Potomac. And as he's doing that, he is cut off along the railroad by the Third Corps of the Federal Army and the Second Corps of the Federal Army. So the Stuart is to the north. You've got the Second and Third Corps of the Federal Army just south of Stuart and Auburn. And then south of that is the main Confederate line near Warrenton, Virginia, along the railroad. So what happens is Stuart actually sends some scouts disguised as Federals through the darkness. He's camped up in this ravine in Auburn, Virginia. Sends scouts through the Federal lines dressed as Federals, who is able to find Lee, and Lee dispatches Ewell to go ahead and try to rescue Stuart, essentially. He sends Ewell's corps up to do that. And so Rhodes' division runs into skirmishers from the 10th New York, and there's this fight that breaks out in Auburn, Virginia, the objective being this hill that separates Stuart and the Confederates, called Coffee Hill. So Stuart, he realizes, he hears the gunfire, he sees his opportunity, takes cannons, and he is able to safely escape from Auburn, Virginia. So here's a map of that. I got it backwards. I'm sorry. The Stuart was south of the Confederate Army. So here's Caldwell's division of Federals. Stuart is down along this creek bed. This is a little bit of a ravine. And up here is Ewell's corps coming to the rescue. They engage the Federals at Caldwell's, or at Coffee Hill. Stuart's horse cannons start firing along from a hill over here next to where he's camped. And Stuart gets to ride southwest around the Federals. He rejoins Ewell's corps, and they continue the march northward.
Hey, Benny.
Yeah.
Do you have a map of the overall, the larger macro flanking march?
Like the whole campaign?
Yeah.
Yeah, right here. So.
Oh yeah, that's the one I was looking at. That's a great map.
Yep. All right. So to recap everything here, you've got Lee starting near Orange Courthouse on October 9th, goes southwest first and then around Cedar Mountain. And he's trying to catch Meade's right flank here.
Yep.
But Meade quickly realizes what's going on, starts to retreat northward. He's basically every few miles outside of Washington, D.C. is a well-fortified city. So Meade's objective is to retreat to Centerville to protect Washington here. And so they both kind of go up, Meade along the Orange and Alexandria Railroad, Lee to the northwest. And that's where you have the battles of Auburn right here, is with Stuart. So he had ridden too far south, got cut off by the rear two columns of, or the rear two corps of the Federal Army, and had to be aided out by Ewell's corps.
This is a pretty broad, sweeping, really almost like Second Manassas for those that are interested in that campaign. I mean, Lee he's taken a wide arc around Meade's flank and forcing him back here. It's a very aggressive move, and it's a very much like the Second Manassas campaign for those that have, and remind, he's only got 2 corps because Longstreet's gone.
Yeah, and the Orange and Alexandria Railroad does run through Manassas Junction right here. So this is going to be fought in the same county as Manassas. It's all in Prince William County.
And all this started because if you want to go back to that for a second, this all.
Which one? That one.
So what you have is, Meade building up forces on the other side of the Rapidan. Meanwhile, Lee is doing the same thing on the other side. He sees Lee send out basically an entire corps minus 1 division all the way south, and he thinks that's his opportunity to strike, only right then to realize, oh crap, I also have to go reinforce that area, and basically weakens his force to the point that he has to now retreat, fearing an assault from Lee, which is exactly what he proposes to do by trying to turn his right flank. And that's what we're getting at right here.
Yep. And Lee's basic instinct here is, instead of just making a stand at Culpeper or anything, is to run 40 miles north to near Washington. That takes place, the Battle of Auburn, where Stuart has to escape, takes place on the morning of October 14th, 1863, and then the Battle of Bristoe Station is going to follow in the afternoon. So here's going to be a story that we've heard before. Stuart had gotten himself into a mess, which meant that, guess what? Heath's division of Hill's Corps is now the lead element of Lee's column marching into relatively unknown areas. They don't exactly know where the Federal Army is. So Hill's Corps is the lead of Lee's column with Heath's division in front. They're moving northeast along this Orange and Alexandria Railroad, and the lead elements start to see at this spot called Broad Run. It's a little creek. They see Union troops crossing this creek, and what they immediately assume and 100% commit to is that this small group of Union soldiers is the rear guard for the Army of the Potomac. And the last troops getting across, and Hill orders Heath to hurry up his pace, and he begins to deploy his brigades for an attack against this Broad Creek and chase the Federals as fast as they can. And as the brigades of Heath's divisions were deploying, they started taking skirmish fire on their right flank. So here's a little map of that. Now this map is oriented a little bit weird. North is to the bottom left corner of this. So they're still, so they're moving still at that northeasterly direction. But right here is the tail end of Sykes's 5th Corps moving across this Broad Run, and that's what Heath and Hill believe to be the end of the Federal column. What they are unaware of, and that's going to become increasingly obvious here, these skirmishers that start taking them from the 2nd Corps, you've got the 1st Minnesota, the 59th New York, and the 7th Michigan on the northwest side of the Orange and Alexandria Railroad. They're going to be actually covering a broader front of the entire 2nd Corps here. So as Heath's brigades go, they're in a column of brigades taking fire from their right. They're going to wheel to face this front, and they're going to drive off these skirmishers that are kind of harassing their right flank. But instead of skirmishers, what they're going to find is the entirety of the 2nd and 3rd Corps that had been delayed after the actions down in Auburn. They're actually the final 2 elements of the Federal Army, and they're not seen. They're behind this railroad embankment. So you've got an entire corps that rushes up. They take this position behind the railroad embankment, and they're about to face off against the Confederates here. So Heath's lead brigades, Kirkland, which is formerly Pettigrew's brigade, and Cook's brigade, wheel in to face this new threat, and they are going to be just completely obliterated by canister fire, by artillery fire, and by volley fire from infantry. It's just not going to go well for them. They make this charge against the railroad here and are basically immediately repulsed. They come back to, they're just running off the battlefield here, completely outgunned, and they have a worse position than they anticipated. In just a moment, in about 45 minutes later, Anderson's division is going to be brought up, and they're going to renew this assault. Anderson's division is going to go up against Alexander Hayes's Federal division, and again, going to be repulsed. Pretty straightforward frontal assault, failed frontal assault. going to take major losses on the Confederate side, about 1,400 casualties compared to 300 on the Federal side. You're also going to have Generals Walker and Cook badly wounded, and then Colonel Posey of Anderson's division, commanding a brigade in Anderson's division, is going to be mortally wounded here. He's gonna, he won't survive the battle.
Kirkland was wounded as well.
Kirkland was wounded as well. Walker and, or I'm sorry, Kirkland was wounded as well. And then Walker, who had formerly been commanding Archer's brigade and Walker's brigade got combined into one brigade.
Right.
Basically, they're going to be marching. It's one of the most straightforward oopses of the war. I mean, Hill just didn't anticipate at all that there was any threat along this railroad line, didn't do proper reconnaissance, and as a result, he kind of walked 2 brigades straight into the Valley of Death here.
They lost some of McIntosh's guns too.
Oh yeah, right here, lost some cannon. So after that battle, Meade's going to continue his retreat up. They're going to make it to Centerville. Lee's going to end the campaign, the Bristoe campaign, but as he's retreating, he's going to start destroying portions of the Orange and Alexandria Railroad to prevent supplies from, basically just to harass Meade, make sure that it's difficult for him to come down. The Confederates are going to retreat to Orange County for the winter. There's going to be, this is still kind of signs that Meade is a little bit of a cautious general. He didn't pursue, even after this, he didn't pursue Lee. He retreated up to Centerville. Warren, however, this is going to be a pretty bright spot for Gouverneur K. Warren, who is temporarily in command of the Second Corps. He is permanently going to be assigned the Fifth Corps when Hancock returns to the Army, because of how quickly he was able to act and take the initiative and take the battle here. And then specifically, morale in the state of North Carolina is going to see this all-time low for a variety of reasons. You have, after Chancellorsville and Gettysburg and now Bristoe Station, North Carolina brigades and men are going to be bearing the brunt of a lot of Lee's aggressive maneuvers. You're going to see desertion rates from the state of North Carolina are going to be fairly high. Ben, you and I were talking a little bit last week that there was like this band of men that was trying to convince North Carolinians to abandon the war effort. Is that?
Yeah, there was North Carolina had always been a hesitant Confederate state, and there was this William Holden was his name. He was a newspaper editor in Raleigh or Wilmington, one of the cities, but he was the editor of a big newspaper down there, and he was very anti-war, anti-Davis administration. And so there are a lot of desertions in North Carolina units that fall. A lot of conscripts were deserting. And so, and like Ben said, I think you take Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, and Bristoe, North Carolina probably had the most casualties of any Confederate state in those battles, and in all 3 of them. And the result is you've just got a very angry, upset populace, and soldiers are not happy.
And so Zebulon Vance, the governor of North Carolina, takes a trip up that winter to start making these rallying speeches for the North Carolinians, correct?
Yep.
To try to inspire them and renew their effort in the war.
Kirkland's brigade is going to lose 602 men, or 40% of their brigade at that event, or at that battle. And Cook, another North Carolina brigade, they're going to suffer 27% and have 700 casualties in this battle alone.
In the events described here, this is about an hour and a half battle, maybe 2 hours, from about 2:30 p.m. until 5 o'clock p.m. is essentially how long this lasts.
So go back to that map real quick, if you would, just to talk about the battle. So Kirkland was the one over here that really got
Yep.
some
So
most heat of the battle right here.
So Kirkland was the first. He wheeled straight into the ambush, essentially.
Yeah, and so I have an account here from an officer of the 5th Florida talking about Cook's men also, right? They came in right after Kirkland and Cook went in. It says that Cook's men could not stand the enemy fire and broke in confusion. The enemy followed, and as the Yanks made their appearance, General Perry wheeled the 8th and 2nd Florida around, forming a right angle to our line, and soon drove them back. And that's so I'm trying to see what Yanks he's talking about that were driving Cook's men.
If you're looking at Perry, Smith.
Amos Ames, yeah.
I don't think many of those brigades got too involved in this fight because the sun was setting.
No, and they didn't. They said the Florida Brigade itself only suffered 3 killed and 21 wounded, so they didn't hardly suffer. Well, one of the wounded was Lieutenant Colonel Baya, who was commanding the 8th Florida at the time. He was shot through both hips during that battle. So not heavy casualties, but they did lose one of their regimental commanders.
And Posey, yeah, he was wounded in the thigh by a shell fragment, and then it ended up getting infected and killing him. So obviously, Lee was never one to outwardly display anger. However, if there was ever a time that he probably wanted to, this is certainly a candidate for that. He said to Hill, he didn't admonish him too much, but the famous quote is, "Let's General, bury these poor men and say nothing more about it." Basically saying, I interpret that as him saying, you know what you did. Yeah. Let's move on. Like,
there's nothing we can do now.
Right. Nothing we can do now. What's done is done.
Yep. And Warren, so you said after this, Warren gets assigned the 5th Corps.
Correct. Yep.
Why is that?
So Warren was temporarily in command of the 2nd Corps after Hancock had been wounded at Gettysburg.
Hancock's still in the hospital. That's why
Hancock's still recuperating. So Warren has taken over his corps, and because of his actions here, he was basically promoted to say, you have earned the right to permanently command a corps. But Hancock comes back in the spring of 1864 to take over the 2nd Corps. So they didn't want to take Hancock's command away from him, so they assigned him in the 5th Corps, which is actually, I mean, so that Warren was in the 5th Corps before he was sent to the 2nd Corps.
And that's Sykes has the 5th Corps, right?
Sykes had the 5th Corps. I forget exactly what happened to Sykes. Because Sykes had the 5th Corps at Gettysburg. Warren famously discovered Longstreet's attack.
Right.
And then was, when after Hancock was wounded, was sent over to the 2nd Corps.
I'm just wondering at what point Sykes was relieved of command.
1 second, we can find that.
Is he still in command of the Corps at this battle too?
Yeah, so he is commanding of the Corps until
relieved of command due to health issues in 64.
Okay.
Yeah, March of 64 is when he's relieved officially, and Warren takes over.
Not because he had actually like misperformed or anything, or done something wrong.
Federals had a nearly impregnable position there behind the
Yeah,
railroad.
this is, I mean, it's reminiscent of Murray's Heights on Fredericksburg or anything. I mean, even if you think about a railroad cut today, like Hill literally could not see over the position And so it was a frontal assault against a fortified position, which we know sometimes ends up well.
Now I'm just
Does-
wondering if Hill is of the mindset here, like where he realizes that he didn't do enough reconnaissance
He did.
beforehand. He
He
did.
took complete responsibility. And so I've got an interesting account here, and I'm reading from Lee's Tard Heels. It's the Pettigrew Kirkland McRae Brigade. And apparently Lee did kind of dress him down a little bit before he said that quote. And again, this comes from this North Carolina Brigade history. The Corps leader accepted full responsibility for the assault. Yes, it is your fault, Lee retorted. You committed a great blunder yesterday. Your line of battle was too short, too thin, and your reserves were too far behind. And then Hill kind of
telling him you did everything wrong.
bowed down, and Lee then said, bury these poor men. Let's say no more about it. So he did mildly rebuke him, but Hill in his after action report said he did take full responsibility. I think this is something we can talk about as an analysis portion of this, but in conclusion, and I think this is interesting, I am convinced that I made the attack too hastily, and at the same time that a delay of half an hour, and there would have been no enemy to attack. In that event, I believe I should equally have blamed myself for not attacking at once.
Well, so I would tend to say that if the enemy that he was referring to was actually the rear guard of the Federal Army, he's 100% correct.
Right.
So he's basically saying he didn't have time to take, if he would have taken the time to take reconnaissance, and it was also the rear guard of the Federal Army,
yep,
he would have lost the initiative.
He never glanced to the right until the brigades were all already in the field approaching the broad run, and then he looked to the right and said, oh my God, there's a corps of infantry over there.
Do you think he saw them, or do you think they started getting bullets started flying in and he was like, holy crap?
Probably both, but that's when they wheeled. At that point, I just would have pulled them back. I think that's his,
retreat to the main column,
right,
hold another defensive position,
maybe let Anderson flank.
Wait, what's that I'm hearing? Sounds like Johnston talk to me.
Well, I mean, what Hill was trying to basically pull another like Chancellorsville. He had a bunch of Union guys that were not. He thought they were undefended in an undefended position. He thought he was going to come up on their rear and blast them out of there. And I think it was a good plan if those guys hadn't been there.
Now, my question is, was Hill unaware of what had happened in Auburn earlier, like the night before and that day? Did he think that the Second and Third Corps were so far behind that they weren't catching up, or did he assume that was the rear guard of the Corps? Or did he not know anything?
It sounds to me more like lack of Stewart actually responding with timely, accurate information once again.
From everything I've read, he assumed that those federal troops in the Broad Run Valley were the rear guard of the Army of the Potomac. And he was going to try to capture, kill, destroy, slaughter as many of them as he could. And that's why he was in such a haste to form up Cook, Kirkland, and Walker to get them down in there to try to kill them and cross the creek. And so he just completely didn't look at off to his right.
And by the time that he was deployed, and as he was deployed, you've got skirmishers picking off the right of Kirkland and Walker and Cook.
I think the main mistake here was not his intent, but he kind of doubled down on the mistake once they wheeled to the right to attack the railroad cut. He should have pulled them back at that point.
Yeah, because even what time is it at that point, anyways?
It's late in the day. They've already marched about 14 miles then.
Yeah, it's already getting late, anyways, and you are now realizing that you are in a terrible position. Like at that point, it's either full go or full stop, and he just went full go, and it just was too defendable of a position. That's really what it came down to.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to bring up, is that just because you're now engaged on the right, it doesn't mean you have to automatically frontal assault this position.
Right.
You can say, oops, I messed up. This isn't what I thought it was. Pull back and just essentially say, yeah, we used a brigade as skirmishers, and move on with it.
Yeah, he should have pulled back, and he should have ordered Anderson, or maybe Ewell, or some of Ewell's people could have tried to flank him out of there, called up supports.
At that point, he's just feeling like either pressure from Lee, or feels that he doesn't want to like fail. He thinks it's just he has to continue no matter what, and you know what I'm saying? Like he thinks at this point that he has no choice but to continue forward and to deal with the new threat on his right, instead of like recuperating, pulling back, figuring out the dispositions of your enemy with better reconnaissance. It's almost like a pride thing, or just a fear of letting Lee down is what it is, how it comes off to me, really. But
he says that
No.
I determined that no time must be lost, and hurried up Heath's division, forming it in line of battle along the crest of the hills and parallel to Broad Run. He said that from this point to Bristoe, we followed close upon the rear of the Third Corps, picking up about 150 stragglers. Upon reaching the hill this side of Broad Run and overlooking the plain on the north side, the Third Corps was discovered resting, a portion of it just commencing the march toward Manassas. So I think he thought they were completely almost en route, retreating. He was picking up, I've read accounts where they were picking up knapsacks and haversacks and equipment along the road. I think he thought he was chasing a depleted, demoralized enemy, and he was going to throw just a couple brigades in there and scare the shit out of them and capture them. Lee said, General, when he forwarded Hill's report, he said to the War Department, he said, General Hill explains how, in his haste to attack the Third Army Corps of the enemy, he overlooked the presence of the Second, which was the cause of the disaster that ensued. James Seddon, the Secretary of War, said the disaster at Bristoe Station seems due to a gallant but over hasty pressing on the enemy. And the best quote of all was Davis's. He says, there was a want of vigilance, by reason of which it appears the Third Army Corps of the enemy got a position giving great advantage to them.
here's the thing: if your attack is ever going too well, it's probably an ambush.
Good point.
I mean, like you said, he probably thought he was chasing a routed, demoralized enemy, picking up knapsacks is just, I got this, and these guys are on the run, and
Yep.
it's going to be too easy. And then boom, you have an entire corps flanking you.
It's very reminiscent of the first day of Gettysburg.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
very similar circumstances. You're going in, you think they're running, you push too far, and then boom, you're getting flanked.
and then again too, high command doubles down on this attack that probably doesn't need to happen.
Right.
I
Instead
mean,
of
just
going back to Harris Ridge, you
exactly.
Davis, and you get a bloody nose with the Iron Brigade. It's the same thing that happened here. What I will say though, if we're doing the analysis portion, I mean, I think the campaign itself is Lee at his magnificent best, flanking Meade out of his position at Culpeper, these wide circuitous flanking maneuvers. I mean, this is like 1862 all over again. And I think, look, yes, this was an absolute disaster for Heath's division, but this was kind of the culture in the Army of Northern Virginia. And I think that's why Lee doesn't completely destroy Hill over this. Is I think, you're rewarded for taking risks. And sometimes those risks don't pan out, but I would rather have you take risks than not take them. And I think Lee always got more upset if you didn't take a chance versus taking a chance and failing.
Unless you were Stuart and you got lost.
Kind of like 1862 all over again. Because there is kind of like a theme where the Army of Northern Virginia has some success in taking risks and dividing its forces and trying to move around the enemy. I mean, they're great at that, and they're great at riding around the enemy with Stuart's cavalry. And so you have like these things that they keep that are similar that they keep doing throughout the war that work, but then they keep making the same fatal mistakes that are also recurrence of past fatal mistakes. And so it's like they get in this trend of like, yeah, okay, we're like this again, we're killing it, and then they make the same mistakes. And it's an interesting juxtaposition because you're looking at the things that they do right the same way, like everything leads into doing the same attack, leading into it, and then it just falls apart every time the same way.
Yeah.
It's so disastrous.
And this ultimately falls on Hill. This is a black mark on Hill's career, no doubt. And Gettysburg, he was able to, win the first day. It worked out well for him just because of all the confluence of all the units coming into town that day. So that wasn't as bad of a mark on him as this was. But on this day, he didn't have any. There was no redemption on this day at all. And again, this was Hill trying to do too much, too quickly, without adequate reconnaissance, and without, and then doubling down once he found out that the Federals were off to his right. That's what I don't understand is why attack a fortified embankment of a railroad with 2 brigades? Because bear in mind, look at Walker. Walker's already crossed the run. He's nowhere. He can't support you. So you're attacking with just Cook and Kirkland against a fortress of a railroad cut.
With a full corps in support of that fortress.
Right. I would have just pulled him back and waited and seen what happened.
Right. See if Anderson could get up. Also,
if anything, they're just retreating farther, which is a plus for you anyways. So
right.
Also, it's late in the day. It's what, 3 hours from sunset. Even if you do gain a position, it's not going to be
exactly. That's what I'm saying. I don't know what Hill's hurry is to get into the action that day. Like, okay, they're there. Take the time. Like, now you ran into them. Now you know where they are. Pull back. Take your time. Like, they're not going to get much farther away in a night. I mean, even if they march all night, the farthest they're going to get is 15 miles away. And at that point, you know which way they're going. And that gives you more time to bring up troops, supplies, support, and then really go after them the right way.
Yeah, like I said, I think he thought originally when he formed Cook and Kirkland to attack the enemy in the valley there, I think he thought this is like taking candy from a baby. This is going to be easy. Like I said, his problem was once the enemy was found along that railroad embankment, that's when he should have said, oh gosh, things have changed. There's changed circumstances. This is not what I thought it was. Pull them back, reform, but Hill's maybe the fightingest division commander or corps commander in Lee's army. Yep. He was a brash guy from the time he was a regimental brigade division commander, and he, again, this is the kind of stuff though that Lee prized in his army. He wanted you to take risks, and unfortunately this one didn't pan out for him.
Well, that's why example of why Lee is that way is like, look at Ewell at Gettysburg. He trusts him completely for not taking any risks, and that was like the big fault of Ewell at Gettysburg. And that's why Hill is in command here, is because Hill is the guy that takes risks and is okay with that.
It's interesting, several months later during the Overland campaign, Lee is absolutely going to dress Hill down for not being more aggressive at Jericho Mills by not pressing Warren's Fifth Corps against to the river, and it's like Hill's got to be thinking, well, gosh, I can't do anything right, like I was too aggressive at Bristoe, and I'm not aggressive enough. But Lee always reserved his biggest gripes for when you didn't take an opportunity. And so, but overall, I think this campaign is really interesting because it showed, I mean, Lee is basically he's trying to force the Army of the Potomac back to the environs of Washington before winter sets in. He's trying to get him as far back from Richmond as he can before 64 campaign opens, because he knows that he's going to have to fight him all the way back. The problem was, once they got up there, Lee realized, and maybe he knew this before, Lee realized he couldn't feed his army up there and supply him. And so that's when Lee's going to pull back to the same position he was in. Meade's going to literally go back to his same position. And this campaign really is going to act like it didn't really even happen. The armies are going to be back in the same position they were by November.
Well, the big deal was for if I'm not mistaken, is for the Orange and Alexandria Railroad. Lee thought that if he could gain even control of that he would be able to better supply his army in Northern Territory, because like he found out in Pennsylvania that he couldn't stand to feed his entire army up there anymore after it had been forged out, and he could be cut off. But if now that you see the passing review of Hill's Corps, you see the rest of the Army of Northern Virginia looking almost as strong as it had been prior to the Gettysburg campaign. I mean, they are looking really good. And Lee thinks like, okay, let's go take this and basically try this again.
Yep. And this is what I think when people criticize Lee's generalship, I think Lee's whole point of fighting and doing these maneuvers was he never wanted to cede the initiative to the Federal Army, because he knew that if he pulled a Johnston, that he's going to end up in Richmond in a siege, and that never works out well. And he wants to keep his army out where it can maneuver, where it can strike some blows, hit a flank. And so this is what, I mean, Bristoe campaign is, I think it's a miraculous feat for a very weakened Army of Northern Virginia. Remember, they don't have Longstreet with them. Yeah, now, right. Granted, the Federal Army doesn't have the 11th and 12th Corps, but still they outnumber them probably 3-2. But the sweeping marches are amazing, and they really show Meade, reacting rather than acting. And this was Lee's whole way of generalship. I'm going to maintain the initiative. You're going to dance to my tune so that I don't get bottled up down in a place where I can't get out of. And that's where Grant next year is going to have the greatest influence on the wars. He's going to grab Lee by the neck, scruff of the neck, and he's going to keep him close to him and force him back to Richmond and Petersburg. And Lee's never going to have a chance to get out in the open and dance again.
It's like a hockey. I don't know how familiar you are with hockey fights, but it's like a hockey fight. You grab the other guy's jersey, pull him in close so that you can continuously beat the crap out of him. That's what Grant does.
This Bristoe campaign is Lee's last major strategical offensive.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is.
Not a tactical offensive. It's his last strategical offensive.
Exactly. Right. That's people don't necessarily understand the difference between strategy and tactics. Strategy.
Why don't you explain it, Dylan?
So strategy is your overall plan, your goal, right? And tactics are the decisions and things you implement to achieve that goal, right? So when you're looking at this here, for the Bristoe campaign, the overall strategy is to move north, gain control of the Orange and Alexandria Railroad, and push Meade back towards Washington. So the overall goal is to go onto the offensive, right? In 64, when Lee is going against Grant, his overall goal is to break free of Grant's chokehold, right? In whatever direction that may be. And the tactical decisions to come to that goal are going to be sometimes to go onto the offensive and sometimes to go onto the defensive. But this is going to be Lee's last strategical offensive moves of the entire war at this point. I hope I explained that not confusingly. Yeah.
Strategy is also, in today's parlance, what you'd call operational.
Right.
And,
logistic, yeah.
And tactics are more kind of what you use during the actual fighting or the marching, But no, I think this is an interesting campaign. And after this, you're going to see the armies basically right back to where they were, along that Rappahannock-Rapidan line. And then we've got this other campaign that's going to, gear up in November called Mine Run, where Meade's going to take the offensive. And
Stupidly.
what was that?
I said stupidly, but that's an exaggeration. But it's not going to turn out well for the Federals.
No.
Is that stupidly in hindsight, or do you think it was avoidable?
Probably stupidly in hindsight. But I also think that it was one of those there was just a lot went wrong. They didn't realize how well entrenched the Confederates were, and it was cold.
And it was cold.
Yeah.
Do we know if there's anything more of or anything left of the Bristoe Station? If there's a battlefield,
there is.
Yep. Bristoe Station Battlefield Heritage Park is what it's called. I think it's a county park.
Yes.
Yep, it's there. They've got the area kind of right where Kirkland fought, and the railroad obviously is still there. It's kind of I would say it's that little swath of land, kind of where Kirkland and Pogue are.
This is a pretty wide front of a battle right here. I don't know exactly how long the lines are.
Would be fun to go there, though. I wouldn't mind seeing this place.
Yeah, I'm wondering how it is from other things, and I mean, it's obviously
it's near Manassas.
Yeah, it's near Manassas, but how far from like Fredericksburg and stuff? I mean,
it's a ways from I want to say like 40 miles to Fredericksburg. It is a 1 hour drive, 39 miles trip from Fredericksburg. So I'm for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's much closer to I mean, it's in Metro Manassas. You know how Manassas is kind of like a suburb. It's like one suburb over from Manassas.
How far from Wilderness and Chancellorsville area?
About the
same as Fredericksburg.
Yeah, that's what I figure in. Any way we can include it in our
no.
So
no.
Ben and I were talking about this. I think, what did we say? If we did a bonus hit, it would probably be the
if we do a bonus hit,
Montpelier.
we're gonna go to Montpelier, which is the winter encampment. So James Madison's plantation in Montpelier in Orange Courthouse, they have found the actual winter encampment location of all 5 regiments of McGowan's brigade.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And for our listeners, if you want to see a really neat video on Confederate winter quarters and this program, type in C-SPAN Confederate winter quarters, and there's an amazing video about how they located this winter encampment and the bases of these cabins that they built back in 1863 and 64 are still there. And they've done a lot of archaeological research. They have found percussion caps, buttons. They have found alkaline jugs that were manufactured in South Carolina. And they have identified 5 regimental camps within this woodlot that is still there on the grounds of Montpelier.
Oh, that's so awesome.
It is. It's amazing.
Do they have any recreations of winter quarters there, or is it just the bases of the originals?
It's the bases. So the cabins were built, obviously, and they've rotted away or been destroyed. But there are, if you sweep away the leaves and the underbrush, there are still these indentations that the men had dug out during the winter, and they have still the little fire pits and the little fireplaces that they built, the stick daubed mud chimneys. And so, for example, I got the book right up here, Barry Benson's Civil War book. He talked about how they would, to play tricks on their comrades, they would drop percussion caps down their fireplaces, and they would explode. And they have excavated these fire pits in these cabins, and they have found percussion caps.
That's awesome. They found caps in the fire pits.
Yep.
Yeah, the
Just for
pickets
being bored, it
when they would come
wouldn't-
back from guard duty, they'd have one guy collect all the caps from their loaded muskets, and just to mess with people, he'd drop the handful down the chimney of the sleeping men. They've also found South Carolina buttons there, which is interesting to me because at that point you've got it's 1860 spring of 1864, and you've got guys taking their jackets and putting South Carolina buttons on their
Don't forget Central
on
Association.
their stuff, or potentially being issued up from the Central Association, private purchase or sent up.
But it's a fascinating video. It's about an hour long. It's called just type in C-SPAN Confederate Winter Quarters, and it's quite a fascinating look at this woodlot. And they also these cabins that they built, they would flood when the rains came, and so they built sump like trenches to discharge the water out of their cabins and stuff when it would rain, and just a lot of neat stuff. And they've actually reconstructed some winter quarters there. A Civil War group from Virginia, reenacting group, had gone down there, and they actually built some reconstructed cabins on the grounds.
That's cool. So
You'd get a kick out of it, Dylan. I think you'd really think it's cool.
Yeah, I definitely would be way down to see that. So I know for a couple, when we go do the wilderness event next year, I'll be there. I'm gonna try to do a few days before and after the event. So before the event, so I could do the tours with you guys, and then I know after the event, Chris and I are gonna try to see some Florida sites. We think we found the spot where Seton Fleming was killed at Cold Harbor. We want to go find that, and then also now I really want to go see this and also Bristoe. So I think we're gonna try to work that into it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could do it. You could do it all if you've got the time.
Yeah, I think I'll do like a week probably, just to get there. When's the first day of the tour? Wednesday.
Thursday. We're gonna do hardcore Thursday and Friday.
Okay, so I'd probably get in like Wednesday night and just stay till the next Wednesday. Were you saying something, Ben?
No, you're making me want to sell everything, buy a van, and just be a Civil War bum in Virginia,
There's got to be a way to make a living doing that. Just going around, like we said, we got to start the bring your own beer tour guide system.
Yeah.
I think this. I've been doing a lot of research on AP Hill's Corps lately, and this John Rogers Cook is a very interesting brigade commander. He's quite a sharp guy, well thought of in the Army. He was a brother-in-law of Jeb Stuart, and I've got some correspondence between him and Stuart.
Is he the one that wrote about shameless self-promotion from someone's wife?
Yeah, so he and Jeb Stuart were communicating in the spring of '63, and Stuart was talking to him about the fact that AP Hill was pressing for Pender to become a major general, and that Ransom, I think it might have been Robert Ransom's wife, was petitioning politicians and such and Lee himself for promotion for her husband. And Stuart was basically writing to Cook about, that's just, so tacky and, not proper. And can you imagine if Mrs. Jeb did that on my behalf? He goes, that would not be good, it's just interesting to see the correspondence. But this Cook guy was a pretty impressive brigade commander. He's going to have a very good career in Hill's Corps. One of the rising stars. Kirkland from what I've read, he was not beloved in the Pettigrew Brigade. He took over for Johnston Pettigrew. He's going to have his, I think his leg shattered here at Bristoe. He's going to take command of another brigade because the guy that they elevate after Kirkland is going to be Colonel McCrae, who actually comes from Cook's Brigade from the 27th North Carolina. McCrae is going to take command of Kirkland's brigade, and the guys are going to love McCrae. Very strict disciplinarian, but made them feel really good about themselves. He took care of them, got them good rations. And McCrae is going to take over this Kirkland Brigade, which is the 26th, the brigade that 26th North Carolina is in. And he's going to basically shift. When Kirkland's ready to come back, they don't let him come back to the brigade. Kirkland has to go to another brigade. But this has a very eerie, similar situation to the first day of Gettysburg. Both, like the railroad cut and the Herbst Woods area fight. And then also, this has a lot of shadows of Iverson versus Baxter.
You mean just running into a brigade and into someone without seeing them and getting absolutely smoked from 50 yards away?
Right. They should have pulled a Johnston on this one.
Should have pulled a Johnston on this one. It would have been the best time for it. See, what I don't understand is what was going on, like, in the next couple of days. Why couldn't, what was the rush to get in that day?
Again, okay, you're not thinking about it like A.P. Hill. I want to destroy this. He thought this was the rear guard.
He thought he was going to be capturing a bunch of stragglers and equipment.
There's still going to be a bunch of stragglers. If that's the case, there's still going to be a bunch of stragglers and equipment in the morning.
Well, maybe not. I think what these guys are learning, and they're learning it with some very hard lessons, is that opportunities don't come along like this every day. And so I hate going back to use Gettysburg, but I'm going to use it. The reason Lee acted the way he did at Gettysburg is he probably thought to himself on some level, I may never have another chance to inflict this upon an enemy that I've already whipped many times. I think Hill looks at this situation, and again, he wants to bag as many prisoners as he can. He wants to give the Army of the Potomac a black eye, especially after Gettysburg. Remember, they want revenge for Gettysburg. Don't think for a minute that they didn't want that. And so again, I think they don't know that they're ever going to have a golden opportunity like this to bag a couple thousand federal prisoners without a fight.
I mean, it makes sense when you're thinking about it like that in the moment, and in the sense of capturing and getting some sweet payback, and everything looks like it's working out. And
right.
But what I'm saying is, when you realize that is no longer the case.
Well, that's just it. I agree with you.
That at that point, what is the continued rush? Why? At that point, things are different. You at least gave it a chance and learned that it's not feasible. And I just don't see it's not even really like pulling a Johnston, because Johnston's pulling back without giving it a chance.
Well, right. No, I agree.
But I just don't see the point in continuing an ill-fated assault when you've seen what that happens. He was at Gettysburg, he was at every other time that's happened, and it's like we were saying, this recurring theme of okay, we're doing things good just like we used to do things good, and then okay, now that critical moment where we should have changed things last time, we have the same opportunity to do that. We're not going to do that. We're just going to roll with it and go in the same failure.
No, you're right. You bring up some really good points. I don't disagree with you at all. I think that's part of it here. But go ahead.
We talk about, there's a term called developing the enemy or developing the position that we talk about a lot. And this is just a lack of doing that. So even on the first day of Gettysburg, when Heath's lead brigades were being deployed, they were deploying and then they were sending out skirmishers, and those skirmishers were engaging and feeling out this to basically. So obviously these generals, they don't have the luxuries of having maps like this in their front. They don't know what the position is, so they have to do it via the ground, and that's what doing it with skirmishers is. And the trade-off for developing your enemy is you get a much more accurate picture of their disposition, but you lose a lot of time doing it. And I think
They're developing you too.
Right. And they're developing you as well. But I think Hill at this point was confident enough in what he saw in front of him that he thought it a worthy trade-off to ignore the whole development process and just go after what he thought was a dangling end of an enemy. And in doing so, the Second Corps did a great job developing the Confederate position. They had skirmishers out there. They started harassing the right flank and then got them out into the open. I mean, Warren was probably either giddy with excitement or shitting bricks about what Lee had in store for him when he saw this. It was either, no, this really is an entire Confederate division unsupported, or Lee has something up his sleeve. But I think
you think Warren felt any hesitation? Like, okay, there's no way I have this full flank right now. Like, there's got to be more of them.
No, because he didn't have to. He didn't have to. All he had to do was post his men up against this railroad cut and pull the trigger a few times and pull the string on cannons. It was zero risk. All he had to do was set up to defend. But I think this lack of development is what you're missing there. Hill didn't do that's what my title was, ignoring putting out skirmishers and developing the enemy's position.
Yeah.
Very rare in the Civil War for you as a general to crush an element of an army. Okay. Whether that be a division or a brigade, it was very rare where you could surround and capture and inflict major damage on an army. And I think Hill wants that redemption. He sees these Federals who are really undefended, who are really gullible out there in this valley. And that's why he pushes it so quickly. And I agree with you, Dylan. Once that circumstance changed and he saw people on his flank, it should have been off, should have gone back. And like Ben said, at that point, now you develop the position with artillery. Lob some shells over there, see what they counter battery fire with you. Another problem I have with Hill's deployment is he sent McIntosh's battery. Look how far up McIntosh's battery is. And Pogue. And they're gonna lose some men there.
Men and guns, yeah.
And guns, yeah. I think we lost Dylan. Well, Dylan, the old Johnston guy is gonna take a break. Look at he looks so sad.
I know it's
because he knows that we're talking shit about Johnston.
It's frozen in time.
Oh, there he's gone. He's control all.
He's gone.
Gone like the North Carolinians. Gone like the Tar Heels.
Yeah. Well, and this is one of those things. I don't think I say North Carolina slander, but this wasn't their fault. They were put in this position. This wasn't a lack of soldiering from the perspective of the brigades of North Carolina, or really even Kirkland or Cook at this point, or even Heath. This isn't even on Heath. This is one of those rare instances where there's plenty of blame to go around, and it all goes to Hill.
Yeah, and he'll admit that. Hill admits that.
Yeah.
Which I give him credit for that. You don't see that a lot in Civil War reports. What he wrote in his report, you rarely, if ever, see a commander of that rank, or any commander for that matter, say that, yeah, I made a mistake. I pushed this too quickly, and I give Hill credit for that. But yet I understand what he was trying to do. I think McIntosh lost 5 guns or something. That's ungodly guns.
The total number of guys, I think they lost like total of 15 between
Oh, that
Macintosh and
many? Jesus.
I think. Let me double check here.
Like,
If there's one thing I want to learn more about in general, it's Civil War artillery. I don't know as much about it as I should. Yeah.
Walker,
I
he
don't know
made
how many.
Walker. Well, there's 4 guns to a battery usually. There's
Right.
4 batteries to a battalion usually. But McIntosh had an entire. I think he was a battalion commander, so it's probably.
Which even not given the situation, he's still way up there in this map. Like even for regular battle that wasn't a complete disaster, you wouldn't have your artillery that far forward.
Right.
I mean, you've got.
It was too aggressive. It was too aggressive, too quick, too much.
Ill-informed, ill-advised.
Yep. Well, it's good. Thank you, Benny.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm first campaign study I've done, so a bit rusty, but we'll
I like this map. Where'd you get this one?
This map, these 3 are all from the Prince William County the Battlefield Heritage Trust or the Battlefield Heritage Park website.
We could maybe do Bristoe on our way down next year, I guess. We could maybe do that. Well, we could probably wrap up the episode, I would say.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, I will I think we'll leave Dylan. Thanks everyone for listening. As always, questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, feel free to message us or drop a comment on our Facebook or YouTube channel. We do read everything that gets sent, even if it is some spam lady saying that she's got search engine optimization for us.
Say no to crushables. Don't wear them.
Say no to crushables. Say no more to crushables. If I see you in the field with a crushable, I reserve the right to pull it off and eat it.
It's not going to be good. Thanks, everyone.